There's a bit of a debate at the moment about who gets to cover politics.
Friends, if you are a content creator, check this out. We have reserved a spot for you.
Just a girl on her way to Australian Parliament House to be part of change.
For the first time, influencers were invited to yesterday's media lockup.
Campaign officials call it a new way of doing politics.
In the lead up to elections in Australia and Canada, social media influencers are getting involved in political coverage. And it's got a few of the traditional media journos a bit riled up.
You're supposedly there to cover the budget, not to be a sycophant.
They weren't allowed to ask questions at the press conference, so they were kind of separate to the mainstream media in that sense.
Great to see the Prime Minister taking advice from the sex and lifestyle podcast in the middle of a cost of living crisis, of all things.
In the United States, big, well-established news outlets are being told to vacate their bureaus inside government buildings to make way for pro-Trump networks.
Nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given.
There's a lot of reasons for this tension, but a big part of it is that traditional media outlets are losing a lot of their power.
We don't have a great deal of trust in what we read in the newspaper, or for that matter, see on the telly.
The reality is that young people these days, I hate to break this to you, don't watch Insiders and they don't read the papers. They get their news off social media.
37% of Aussies say they trust the media to do what's right, and that's down from 40% last year.
But the problem is, investigating, exposing and questioning the powerful requires a lot of access, resources and time. New media outlets rarely have a big enough workforce. The old media, broadcasters and newspapers, used to have that, but increasingly don't.
With a dramatic decline in advertising, regional newspapers will struggle to survive.
Advertisers are abandoning free-to-air television, and that's largely because they're seeking digital alternatives.
Back in the old days, advertising revenue kept journalism afloat. But now, most of the advertising revenue is going into the pockets of a handful of billionaire middlemen, most of whom were at Donald Trump's inauguration, right there in the front row. Now, oddly enough, the situation isn't hopeless. One unexpected country is fighting back and trying to make Facebook, Google, X, TikTok and others support the local media.
The charge is expected to be around $200 million a year, which they'll have to pay whether they run Australian news or not.
Australia has spent the last few years trying to find a way to fix social media. And if it works, it could potentially help democracy everywhere. But the big boy billionaires are fighting back, and it's affecting what you can see in your newsfeed. This is the first of 3 episodes where we're going to be looking at Australia's attempt to rein in social media companies and shore up democratic principles, not just here, but everywhere. Will it work, or will the broligarchs win? I'm Matt Bevan, and from If You're Listening, this is Australia versus the Internet. In this first episode, we're going to be talking about Australia's attempts to get social media giants to help pay for local journalism.
The ACCC says journalism is a public good. So it's drafted a law that would require Google and Facebook to negotiate a payment for content.
And the story of this begins in the most cringe era in the history of technology, the mid-1990s.
Take a look at this fantastic complete computer package offer.
Yamaha Home Theatre will blow you away.
So let's go back there and check it out, eh?
Australians, all their dust, oh, we are young and free.
Whoa, hey, yeah, not that one. The real thing I'm trying to show you is somehow even more cringe than 5-year-old me singing the national anthem, if you'll believe it. But here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Ballmer!
It was the era of extremely unfit billionaire tech executives dancing on stage and screaming at their workers to launch their new products.
I have 4 words for you. I love this company. Yeah!
I've gone deep into the ABC content mines and I've uncovered an Australian version of one of these product launch events.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the next hour as we glimpse the highlights and the fun aspects of Windows 95.
In 1995, Microsoft launched their new operating system in Sydney.
For now, sit back, relax, prepare to have a fun look at some amazing software and let us show you why the world will never be the same again.
A mulleted gentleman has now thrown to a laser light show introducing none other than...
The world will never be the same again!
Dame Edna.
Funnily enough, Microsoft describes my late husband very well.
And all the hype was really to compensate for the fact that while everyone was very excited about computers and the internet, nobody was quite sure what the internet was for.
There's always something new every day. You can see how many Cokes are left in the Coke machine at Carnegie Mellon in New York. You can get a picture of the beach from somewhere in California, or you can do research. You can get the latest research papers.
Imagine waking up from a 30-year coma today and hearing, well, we were counting Cokes and looking at beach pictures, and then, yada, 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 half a dozen tech companies control the entire world. But even back then, there were some people who had an inkling of the internet's true potential.
Whole new audiences and markets are being created.
News Corporation boss Rupert Murdoch thought that the internet created an opportunity to find new viewers and readers for his newspapers.
Right now, anyone, anywhere in the world is able to go to a computer screen, get information, news and entertainment, work and play at minimal cost.
He could just set up news websites for people to access and not have to spend all that money delivering physical newspapers all over the country. But Rupert Murdoch was missing something crucial. The reason people advertised in his papers was because of the distribution system. Advertisers were paying him to put their slogans and logos onto millions of front porches every morning. The internet provided a new, cheaper way to deliver news, but it also provided a new, cheaper way to advertise and sell your products.
All of a sudden, I can sit here on the internet and buy goods. Where does that leave the large media moguls? Where does that leave the large corporate empires? Slowly and surely dying.
But the shift wasn't just about a physical one from papers to screens. It also opened up an important legal question about who should be held responsible for publishing. And this legal question was answered with a single online ad in 1995.
Shannon and Spinozzi, mornings, classic rock all day on 107.7 KRXO.
On the 1st of May 1995, this Oklahoma City breakfast radio show was outraged. It was a week after the horrific Oklahoma City terrorist bombing that killed 167 people, and radio host Mark Shannon had been told that somebody was putting ads on the website AOL for t-shirts covered in slogans making jokes about the bombing. The ad was posted under the name Ken and had a phone number attached. Mark Shannon encouraged his listeners to call that number and express their anger at the person who had posted the ad. Hours later, AOL got a phone call from a man named Ken Zaran. He was the owner of a small real estate magazine in Seattle, and he was wondering why he was suddenly getting an enormous number of angry phone calls.
And basically I told him, my phone's ringing off the hook and I can't get anything done, and it's all these people upset about something that they saw on AOL.
Ken Zaran later did an interview on NPR and he said the callers were furious.
How could you do this? What a loser you are.
Eventually, AOL took down the ads, but the company didn't do anything to correct the record or prevent new copycat ads from popping up. Zaran took them to court. And see, if the ads had been posted in a newspaper, this was an open and shut case of defamation. Zaran would win easily. But little did Ken Zaran know, websites had very recently been given legal immunity.
Bill Clinton signed America's huge telecommunications bill into law today.
Huge was right. 107 pages filled with new and exciting laws that set out to govern the internet. One of the goals was to make websites act more like media outlets.
Hardcore pornography and the use of indecent language which children may access on the internet is now illegal.
Big website owners like Yahoo didn't like these new censorship laws at all. They said the law was violating the right to free speech, and so they shut down their sites.
Screens across the country are all black in protest.
But elsewhere, on a different page of the same bill, was a provision that the website owners learned to like a lot, because it clearly put them in a separate category from media outlets. But at the time, basically nobody had noticed that such a consequential law had been passed.
Having gone through all the newspaper clips, there was really no coverage of this. So lawyers didn't even know what to do with it.
Jeff Kosef is the author of a book called The 26 Words That Created the Internet. These 26 words that had been passed through the US Congress were an attempt to cut red tape and help online businesses grow. Here's what those 26 words say.
No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held to be the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So that's the 26 words. If you don't know what that means, that's okay, because nobody then knew what it meant.
It was these 26 words, which came to be known as Section 230, that would decide Ken Zaran's case. The implication of the law was that while AOL did have the right to delete stuff that was posted on their sites, they were not responsible for it. They aren't publishers like newspapers are. So the troll who posted the ads for those t-shirts could be sued, if Ken could ever find them, but AOL was free and clear. This is the basis of the modern internet. It's this law, and others like it in other countries, that enables Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube and others to have open comment sections without any fear of being sued into oblivion by someone like Ken Zaran. Dame Edna's prophecy had come true.
The world will never be the same again!
I want to make it clear that up until quite recently, most journalists didn't have a massive beef with Google or Facebook.
And tonight, for the first time, we'll be showing on screen a small selection of the thousands of live comments that viewers make using Twitter.
I think this is one of the most exciting times ever to be alive, because what's really happening is a worldwide conversation.
You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
You can use the Quanda hashtag to join or follow the Twitter conversation online.
And media outlets were in constant contact with the social media companies to figure out how we could best work together with them to make news accessible. You want video? We'll make video. You want catchier headlines? We'll make catchier headlines. It was a symbiotic relationship. We created the news content, they shared it with our audiences. By 2017, Facebook and Google were responsible for more than half of the traffic to news websites in Australia. And that is when it all fell apart. It started with the comments.
Dylan Voller was big news. But today, some of the biggest media companies who posted the story on Facebook have had a rude awakening.
In 2017, a video of an Indigenous teenager named Dylan Voller being mistreated while in a youth detention centre sent shockwaves around Australia.
Images of his treatment shown on the ABC's Four Corners program prompted a royal commission into youth detention in the Northern Territory.
When the news was posted on Facebook, users started posting defamatory slurs against Dylan Voller. Now, Section 230 and laws like it prevent Dylan Voller from suing Facebook. But what about the news outlets that had posted the story online and invited people to comment?
The companies told the court they weren't the publishers of the Facebook posts, so couldn't be held responsible.
But the courts decided that actually they could.
The High Court has found they are liable for comments posted by the public on their Facebook pages.
If you're watching this on YouTube right now, this is the reason why our comments section is closed. We would have to have staff monitoring all of your comments for defamation. So, bye-bye comments. The second thing was zero-click searches or results. Watch this. Hey Google, what is a zero-click search?
On the website verbolia.com, they say, what are zero-click searches? The term zero-click results refers to any result that Google shows you without sending you to a specific website. For example, if you search for the age of your favorite celebrity, Google will present you with the answer without you having to click on a website.
See, somebody wrote an article about the idea of zero-click searches, and I just got the key fact from the article without clicking on it. Google took the information from the news article and served it up to me with 0 clicks. Which is great for Google because they get the ad revenue, not so great for the journalist who actually wrote the original article though. By 2021, 65% of Google searches were 0-click searches. Google was using news content to answer people's questions and keeping all the ad revenue to themselves. So the Australian government decided to do something about it.
The federal government devised world-first legislation to make big tech companies pay for news content to safeguard public interest journalism.
The law basically said big tech had to negotiate deals with Australian news outlets or they'd be sorry. And because Google and Facebook are serious companies run by level-headed, reasonable adults, they came to the table and they flipped it.
If this version of the code were to become law, it would give us no real choice but to stop making Google search available in Australia.
Australian media companies are united, and the Prime Minister is on their side.
We don't respond to threats.
Was this an overreaction from them? Maybe. But the concern was that this would set a precedent.
For Google and Facebook, it's a challenge to their global dominance, given other countries could adopt Australia's rules.
It turns out that threat wasn't idle.
This morning, Facebook closed down links to Australian news pages, including the ABC, Nine Media and News Corporation.
News was banned from Australian Facebook feeds for a whole week, in which time the world had a very vibrant debate about whether or not this law was actually a good idea.
We need a vibrant public interest, investigative, free journalism ecosystem in this country.
This legislation is pure protectionism out of the brain of Rupert Murdoch to try to create a tax on his competitors.
Google and Facebook are being asked to do something they really don't want to do, which is pay for something they now get for free.
Eventually, a compromise was reached. Google and Facebook struck 3-year deals with Australian media outlets, injecting more than $200 million into the sector. It was great because it meant that new journalists could be employed and existing journalists had some job security.
New ABC podcast has since found...
That is what happened to me. That money kept me in a job through 2022, as my position was funded by what everyone at the ABC called the Google money. Everyone seemed to have accepted the new system. But then, another government tried to follow the Australian precedent.
We recently passed legislation that says, Facebook, if you're going to be sharing news or work done by Canadian journalists or local news, you have to make sure they're compensated for it fairly.
That's former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau copying Australia's homework. But this time around, Facebook in particular was not having it at all.
Facebook is blocking news from its sites.
This was 2 years ago. There has been no news in Canadian Facebook and Instagram feeds ever since. By 2024, the deals struck in Australia were due for renewal. Google signed on, but...
Facebook, or Meta as it's now known, has chosen to walk away.
No deal. Not here or anywhere. Facebook decided it was no longer interested in putting news in your so-called newsfeed.
The number of people using Facebook News in Australia and the US has dropped by over 80% last year.
Facebook has clearly decided it no longer wants to be in the news business. It's just too expensive.
Meanwhile, X, the dearly departed Twitter, has basically done the same thing, deprioritising news links. And this is really quite bad. Largely because Australia and Canada both have upcoming federal elections in this brave new newsless world.
Thank you very much.
And we've never seen elections like it. The only political content in Facebook feeds is political advertising and politicians talking to influencers. There is very little traditional news. Meanwhile, the Australian government is trying to find another way to make Facebook pay for journalism anyway, with some kind of a tax. But guess what?
US tech companies are urging the Trump administration to target Australia.
As Donald Trump announced tariffs on Australia, the broligarchs, who were sitting in the front row of his inauguration, brought these annoying little laws to his attention.
What they are asking is for them to pressure the Australian government to change these regulations.
Cool. I think that the chances of broad multinational regulation of big tech companies is pretty unlikely in the short term. Donald Trump is unlikely to back it. And to be honest, even the Democrats might have taken the tech giant's side. But this effort by Australia and Canada is worth keeping an eye on. A strong argument can be made that in the coming 4 years at least, having a well-funded media is going to be pretty important.